Hangzhou is a city full of traditional beauty and modern energy. Here, the 11th G20 is being held, and this is also where the headquarters of two famous companies, Geely and Alibaba, are located. The former acquired Volvo from Ford Motors in 2010 and turned it into profit in just 3 years. The latter, listed on the New York Stock Exchange, made the biggest IPO in U.S. history. So, what's the momentum behind their success, and where does the vitality come from? Well, Robert Kapp, director of the Economist Corporate Network, has been taking a tour around the two. Let's go find out what he has got to tell us. Oh, hey, Rob.
Hey, Mama.
There you are.
Nice to see you.
I can see you're really enjoying yourself here. It's great to see you here in
Nice
Hangzhou.
to see you again.
So, you've toured the city and you visited Geely's research center. Share with us your impression. What was the first thing that came to your mind?
Well, you can see that this company is really emphasizing innovation, which, as you know, is a big theme for the G20 summit as well.
Absolutely, Rob. I mean, innovation is given unprecedented priority here in China, especially with its presidency of the G20 this year. So, how do you read into this theme?
Well, I think it's something that's not only important for China, it's actually important for the whole global economy. We're seeing an era of very low interest rates and a slowdown. So you need to innovate to get the economic drivers going again.
So there's the question of how innovation drives growth.
Indeed, indeed.
Right.
That's been around for a long time, but it's more important now when the other levers for growth aren't working.
Now, from your perspectives, do you think that China has a good enough environment to encourage innovation?
That's a very complex question. I think there are these efforts going on. So Geely is a good example of the effort that's being made. And there are other companies, of course. But if effort is going to pay off, then that's a good sign, because you can see this attempt at bringing more innovation into the economy, which China, to be honest, hasn't been well known for in the past.
So what are some of the stories that you've heard here in Geely that could illustrate your idea?
Well, one was really interesting, talking to a designer who's actually a foreigner working here in Shanghai, and he's incorporated Chinese designs. I'm a big fan of traditional Chinese culture myself, and he's been using traditional motifs in the way the car in a modern vehicle is being worked on in the exterior as well as the interior.
So, Rob, I know you are a car enthusiast. Did you find pleasure driving a new energy vehicle?
Well, I'm kind of like a kid with that. If I get a new car to play with, I do enjoy it. New energy, though, excites me even more, because that is the future of so many industries. It's just better for human beings, right? That's the first thing. The other thing, though, is sustainability. If you want to have industries that can compete in the future, we've been using hydrocarbons, petroleum, for over 100 years, and that's really an outdated way to drive not just cars, but all sorts of aspects of industry.
But the reality is only a very tiny share of China's auto sales are new energy vehicles. So how do you envision the future of this industry?
Well, it's going to be a process, and you could argue that actually China has lagged a bit in this regard. The other argument in China's favor is that, well, it's still been a developing economy, so you want to expect like what we see in California, where I'm from, or Germany, or other countries where they're more advanced and have really promoted the new technologies, to see it here yet. However, this is a key juncture for China. So if it is going to leap forward to that more modern aspect of not just manufacturing, but indeed driving, how people get around, it's going to have things like new energy.
But the Chinese government is going to reduce subsidies on the new vehicle industry, so do you think that's a major problem?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think probably the experience has been when they have given subsidies, they weren't always put to the best use. And in the meantime, the Japanese, German, American technologies have gone forward without those subsidies. So the best thing you could argue for Chinese industry is to compete head-to-head with these other advanced nations. And I think that's part of what we're seeing here. And ideally, China will have the chance, like we were just talking about, to not just produce for China, but also abroad when it comes to automobiles. So far, they really haven't brought any Chinese brands outside of China yet in cars.
Right, but what are some of the competitive strengths that you think Chinese companies has to offer when they compete with their rivals, for example, German, Japan?
We'll have to see. I mean, one of the things that impressed me today was the way they have integrated this team of designers and engineers. They work, with not just only a Chinese operation for their R&D, but also overseas. To do that effectively is not easy. Actually, that's been something that's been bothering particularly Japanese companies, have fallen behind in that regard, integrating foreign workforces. Americans maybe do it a little bit better. For China, it's something very new. But if they continue to do what I've been observing, which is very encouraging, then that bodes well. It would have to be, of course, more than just one company doing it and really tapping the talent that you have around the world. But if they can do that, that really helps unlock the power of innovation. And when you think of new technology, it's coming from so many different sources. IT companies are jumping in on this. IT entrepreneurs are getting into this as well. So it's not just people from the car industry, but other industries, and you need that kind of global platform, I think, to compete well.
Now, what would be your top concern if you were to make a list, the pros and cons with this new technology?
Well, as it currently exists, I mean, one of the biggest issues with these hybrid vehicles or all-electric vehicles is their range. You don't get very far just with pure electric. You also have an issue with charging stations when it comes to pure electric. And in China in particular, I have to say they're behind. I've lived in California for a number of years. I'm originally from there. And that actually within the entire United States leads in providing that kind of infrastructure and support. So China has some catch up with areas of the world that have already been supporting these things. And for this technology, it will need, I think, a little bit more, maybe not subsidies, but in terms of infrastructure to be really effective and take off in the market.
What are your experiences here?
Well, positive. I mean, from a short visit, you can't tell too much. But the cars I saw, the ones I got to sit in and actually played around with driving, it was impressive. They're at the level of what you'd expect a globally competitive automobile to be. And hopefully that's going to be the case not only in these test models, but in the actual products they put out in the market.
So Robert, what is your top concern when you think of Chinese-made products?
I have to say, I mean, it goes everything from not just manufactured goods, but we think of food stuff. And China's had a lot of scandals around unsafe food. We also see it in products like cars, where people, I think, who haven't bought Chinese cars before in foreign markets, of course they're going to be concerned about safety. What was impressive to me is this morning we had a chance to visit a testing facility, and they're using global standards. They're even using global testing equipment. And then on top of that, they take the cars and they test them elsewhere in the world. So there's absolutely no opportunity to fudge the data. And they're meeting very high ratings. So that means you've seen an improvement. It's indisputable that China has moved forward, at least with this example, the testing center we saw today, in terms of quality. And hopefully that will allow other consumers abroad to have more choices in selecting cars where they haven't had the chance to buy a Chinese car in the past.
So Rob, we've seen a lot of Chinese inventions today, but what does this London symbol have to do with this Chinese brand?
Rather interesting. This is a company that had been very well known, not only as a British icon, but indeed, like you were saying, a London symbol as well. And it had a partnership with Geely. Geely is better known for its acquisition of Volvo, but after the partnership was formed, the company itself fell on hard times, and so Geely came in, invested a lot. The latest version of this vehicle is going to be sophisticated to the point of having GPS control that allows it, when it reaches this certain central area of London, to switch to being fully carbon-free in terms of its emissions platform. So that's something that we haven't really had in the past with that level of sophistication, and yet that's happening through indeed what is a British car, but with now Chinese ownership and investment behind it.
And very often the most advanced technologies have been owned by Western companies, and now Chinese automakers are catching up.
They are. We were talking earlier today with a leading researcher here, and he was mentioning how, apart from their company itself, for China as a whole, the emphasis on what we were just discussing, these new powertrain systems that are ecologically friendly, having new automation to the degree of voice control. So it's a revolutionary concept that's transforming the whole world of driving, and it's interesting to see how Chinese brands are trying to take part of that.
So it's interesting to see that mergers and acquisitions go way beyond just the flow of capital.
That's right.
It's more about the integration of technologies, expertise, and experiences.
In strategy as well, because it's a matter, one particular brand is going to approach it one way, others are going to try another. Just as I think this partnership that turned into an acquisition shows, you can have a very good company, maybe even very attractive offering, but if it's not managed or able to respond to changing market circumstances, it can fall in hard times. It's very promising right now what the Chinese companies can do for jumping into this move towards autonomous driving. The voice control, telemetrics is the technical term for that, where you have so much of the automated features that used to be given to human control now run on various systems. It'll be interesting to see which system takes the lead.
Also, Rob, the whole purpose of transportation is to make people have greater mobility and connectivity. And if I may expand things a bit further, connectivity is the core philosophy of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to link up Asia, Europe, and Africa, almost every part of the world. So why is this initiative essential to China's future?
Well, China, as we've been talking about in many of our discussion points today, really is at this juncture in its economic development. Before, it's relied on developed markets for its exports, and it's relied on cheaper labor. Now it's moving up the value chain. So as it begins to export higher value goods and services, it needs new markets to access. And Belt and Road is a big part of that. You can think of it as building up yes, a communications and transportation infrastructure, but it's really underpinning trade. And it's an idea that will hopefully, if it comes to fruition as we're all expecting, promote more trade between the nations that connects. And that'll be good for growth, of course, everywhere, particularly for China, because these are new markets for China to access.
And then how is it relevant to the rest of the world?
Well, at the same time, you can see just as China is trying to get access to markets, like you mentioned, Africa, Central Asia, often areas that haven't been very economically interactive, except for maybe exporting basic materials, natural resources. If the program rolls out in a way that's truly mutually beneficial, then those countries should also have a chance now to start industrializing, bringing in more, like you're mentioning here, with transportation, cars, having access to goods and services that they didn't have before, which will also help their economies become stronger. That's if it works the way it's supposed to. We'll see, but that's the great promise of One Belt, One Road.
And again, the economy will take center stage at this year's G20 summit.
It is.
And now, I think this is our right to our next stop, Alibaba. So here we are at AliExpress, one of the departments at the company's headquarters in Hangzhou. Very international environment, lots of international staff and clocks pointing to different time zones.
Flags everywhere, yeah.
That's right. Actually, the company launched the AliExpress initiative, the platform, 6 years ago, and it's been a huge success, especially in Russia.
I've heard also in Europe, in markets like Spain.
Different parts of the world.
I think we have someone here to tell us more about that.
Awesome. Let's hear Ali's international strategy.
Welcome to AliExpress.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Sure.
所以中国的电商品牌在海外取得了很大的成功，特别是在俄罗斯做到了最大。这一点是怎么实现的？然后这个 AliExpress 今后发展的战略是什么
？AliExpress 是在2010年成立的，最初的业务就是面对海外的买家，然后把中国的商品卖到全球，然后是一个在线交易平台。然后在过去的6年，其实是一个增长非常快速的一个过程。然后尤其是在一些跟 G20 相关的国家，包括在俄罗斯，在相关的一些国家，我们是在当地是非常领先的一个情况，然后是当地非常流行的一个网站。因为中国的商品对于海外很多买家来说是一个非常好的选择，因为它的相对来说它的商品的丰富度非常强，然后相对来说价格就更具有竞争力，然后所以我们能够通过这样一个优势，在海外包括俄罗斯非常快速的得到很多买家的认可。在未来，其实 AliExpress 是一个全球的一个在线交易平台，我们会把全球的卖家，包括任何国家希望通过电子商务来去销售的中小企业引入到这个网站，然后我们会让全球的买家来在一个网站上来去买他所需要的商品，因为 AliExpress 实际上是一个基础建设，我们是帮助这些中小企业打通了包括物流、包括支付在全球的这些障碍，然后以及向全世界的买家进行沟通的一个平台。
就是把全球的这些商家买卖有这种买卖意愿的人全都连接到一起。
这个交易平台。
对。
那你说的这个卖家，他是个人卖家还是以公司为单位的？
我们现在比较希望能服务的是企业，就是中小企业，最好是要有自己的品牌的。我们能够希望帮助这样的企业把它的品牌。它可能最初只是在自己的国家里有一定的知名度，能够在全球能够做起 这个品牌的影响力。
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
谢谢向我们介绍 AliExpress 的情况，谢谢。So that's about AliExpress. Shall we go find out more?
Let's go on to our next place.
Go on. So we've just visited AliExpress, and the unit is part of the company's expansion plan in the world. And now we have James Dong, who's with Alibaba B2B, and he has more to tell us. So it's great to have you with us, James.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the EWTP, which is a bigger plan for your company, for Alibaba, to expand overseas. And the ultimate goal of this plan is to reduce tax and customs procedures. What's the vision behind this goal? I know that Jack Ma is trying to lobby representatives from world economies to back his vision, but what's at the core of his vision?
Sure. The vision actually, you can date it back to 17 years ago when Jack Ma founded Alibaba. Our vision at that time was to make it easy to do business everywhere in the world. That vision never changed, right? We started from, back then, started from having Chinese manufacturers, those SMEs, smaller companies, who actually didn't really get an opportunity to sell to overseas, but then connect them with the SME buyers from the US, from Europe, so that they connect to each other and they do cross-border trading, right? And then gradually, we, over the past 17 years, we also enhanced our own capabilities as well. Besides, providing a place for them to meet each other, we also started by providing more ecosystem. For example, within the buyers and sellers in the entire value chain, we have, logistics, we have custom clearance, tax refund, payment, financing, so on and so forth, right? This entire ecosystem, basically we use a platform approach. It's an ecosystem where we invite a lot of service providers to work with us and serve the SMEs on the seller side and also on the buyer side.
Well, this proposal, the
Yeah.
EWTP, has been submitted for discussion at the G20. What merits do you see in this proposal?
I think in terms of what it's trying to achieve, it's the sort of thing that G20 is looking for. It wants to find ways to increase trade. It's trying to open up more markets for SMEs in particular. It could be that Alibaba, among others, could play a leading role in that. I think what's going to be important is that the leaders understand this really is something that's open and transparent. That's usually what you get into with issues when these proposals are made, that it doesn't provide some favoritism, whether it's for Alibaba or any other company, but that indeed this is going to be something that truly helps all the participants. Now that happens, that really would be a win-win, as the Chinese like to say, and in fact more than a double win, it would like a multiple win, right? Because all sorts of economies could take advantage of this.
But compared to free trade agreements under global frameworks, which cater mostly to governments and multinationals, it seems that the e-commerce platform allows SMEs to set their own rules in trade.
Yeah, in some way you can say that. I think in the older ways, right, the world cross-border trading, the rules and the whole mechanism was more defined by the multinational companies, as you said, and also governments, right? However, the e-commerce system is a tool, really can bring transparency and also bring efficiency to the cross-border trading, which also enables all those SMEs, both on the buyer side and also on the seller side, to be able to do transactions at a so much lower cost.
Are you giving priorities to a developing country or developed countries when allowing SMEs to be better connected?
I think both. Actually, both parties are very important to us. In the past, normally for the developing countries, it's very much supplier-centric, right? And then for the developed countries, it's very much buyer-centric.
Yeah.
But now I think both markets are very important.
And also it seems like a lot of the vision that Alibaba has actually has to do with government support. So do you think that when doing business overseas, Alibaba could get the same degree of support as it did in China?
That's an interesting question. I think what you probably have seen play out is something like in Russia, where we were just hearing that their AliExpress does very well. obviously you have a certain dynamic there where Western companies can't enter the market for a variety of reasons, but they're not welcome or they're not permitted by their governments because of the embargo situation. It does play out to your question about, you know, what role governments can play. And it's not just maybe the home market government, in this case for Alibaba China, but the target market government. So in a case like Russia, you know, it is very much looking for foreign investment and people who can help develop its marketplace. Alibaba has obviously had a lot of warm reception. In a place like India, it's not only competition, but also a government sense of maybe being somewhat cautious about Chinese ambitions. Other markets, it depends. You know, American companies also face this issue. Inevitably, when you're coming from a big economy, foreign markets can look at you in a different way than if you're coming from a small economy.
So the ultimate goal of Alibaba's plan, the EWTP, e-commerce worldwide, is to break down trade barriers.
Yeah.
Is that a realistic goal, James?
Not really break down, but make it slightly easier for the buyers and sellers. I think based on our past experience, it's doable.
If I could just add a comment there, I think it's a great idea. Again, what's going to be key, though, to this is not only the technology, which obviously companies like Alibaba and others have, but indeed that government support. Also to one of your earlier questions, I mean, it's something like a truly open platform. Apart from just making it easier to do business, if you really want to see trade increase, you're going to have to reduce the barriers, as you were mentioning. So if, in addition to the platform, we can have a reduction in tariffs, a true opportunity for SMEs to trade abroad, that'll be great. That'll be great for them, it'll be great for consumers.
So representatives come to the G20 with their different agenda, and a lot of them are here with the goal of alleviating poverty, especially to improve lives for the rural population. And I heard that Alibaba has a similar initiative. Tell us more about that.
Sure. This is the initiative that we are really proud of. It's called Rural Taobao. I think when everyone heard Taobao, they think of you know, a platform selling consumer goods to the rural area. But that's not a big part of the vision, right? Our vision is really to improve the life quality of in the rural area. So start from selling consumer goods to the rural area, but we also help the villagers to buy a good quality, let's say, fertilizer, seeds, so on and so forth, so that we can help them growing better products. And also, we help them to sell those products from the rural area to the cities.
I was going to say that's actually, when you look at in terms of global initiatives, the UN, the World Bank, all sorts of globally minded organizations are trying to find ways to particularly encourage the latter part of what James was talking about, which is helping farmers, these rural farmers who normally don't have access to these markets even at home, let alone the world at large, to help them traverse really these barriers of distance and other trade impediments and allow them to access consumers across the globe. So it's great. I mean, if we can learn perhaps from China, if rural Taobao is the success that is said, then maybe that could become a platform for others to consider learning from or perhaps even using. But that is a key area of global poverty right now, is the rural areas that just don't have access to services, particularly in the area of marketing, and allowing these farmers to tap into global wealth in that way would be transformational if it can be accomplished.
So the e-commerce platforms have created a lot of rooms for SMEs, but at the same time, I think it's also raised a bar. Products with poor quality are losing market share, and that has forced a lot of companies to innovate and to find a way out of this dilemma. So where does innovation fit into Alibaba's development plan?
I think, you know, generally speaking, the entire business model of Alibaba was an innovation back then, right? And then this market mechanism on this platform actually helps promote innovation, whether it's innovative products or innovative business model. The reason I'm saying this is, for example, the market mechanism is actually, you know, through a lot of algorithms and data, so that we can help emerge all those good sellers. And then good sellers with innovative business model, with more innovative products, will be more visible than any other sellers and any other products on the platform, so that more buyers will be able to reach out to them.
Well, what's also interesting about the aspect of innovation is the more you have these smaller companies get involved in trade, the more we might see tendencies away from protectionism. Protectionism basically comes about when one country perceives unfair trade from another. And China, to be honest, is very much perceived as practicing unfair trade. Whether that's justified or not, we could discuss separately. But one of the ways that China might find its goods more openly received abroad is if it's pointing out this just isn't, say, a state-owned enterprise where state-owned subsidies are particularly criticized by its trading partners, but you have these smaller mom-and-pop type operations, as we call them, and they're offering goods and services that are seen as being truly competitive, truly innovative. So that's a way that innovation can help reduce the tendencies towards protectionism. And the more you've got also what Alibaba, it sounds like, is trying to achieve, and I think other e-commerce platforms aim for, is to help foreign country participants, these small companies, also get involved and sell their goods to China. So the more you have that interaction, the more there's less reason for raising protectionist trade barriers, and that's a good thing. I mean, that's
exactly.
You know, regardless of one's politics, everyone can get behind the idea of protectionism. The problem is usually what happens is when it's affecting you, you start to be protectionist and you don't want it from others, but you allow it for yourself. But the more we can get everyone involved, the less you have reason for thinking of protectionism.
So let's hope the G20 will succeed in reducing protectionism while at the same time encouraging innovation and promoting inclusiveness.
Absolutely. It'd be a great goal if they can achieve all that. Fingers crossed.
Fingers
Very
crossed.
much looking forward to.
Indeed.
Well, thank you very much, Rob, and thank you, James.
Thank you, Mamang. Thank you, James.
Thanks.